From beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, it is a Neglected News Report. I'm Scott Mitchell here with my brother Kevin.
Welcome from the hottest city in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, we don't mean hot in a good way either. Sorry, I had some a mic malfunction here. Need to get a new mic stand for this thing. Can't reach the on-off button very easily with it. Anyway, it's been one of those weeks again. But then again, in Obama's America, every week is one of those weeks. Anyway, yeah, it's kind of cooled off a little bit here in Phoenix the last few days, but I don't expect that to last long.
That means under 110 degrees.
Yeah, but the humidity's been up. we had one heck of a storm last night. The second big storm like that this week,
which raises a kind of a perplexing question. For years, we call this our monsoon season. Monsoons are storms that come up from Mexico. But all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, they changed the language. They're called haboobs now.
Oh, actually, well, hold on. There's a difference. First of all, monsoon is not necessarily a storm, although storms can come with it. It's actually the breeze, the wind, the air is known as a monsoon. The haboob is the dust storm.
Well, we used to call them dust storms. Why the haboob? That's more of an Arab term, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't get it. It's like how I found out about it was a friend of mine that lives in Massachusetts said, "Dude, you okay?" I go, "Why?" "Well, last night we saw the gigantic haboob on the news." "What's a haboob?" "The big dust storm." Okay, we just call them dust storms. And we've survived many in the past. We will survive many in the future.
And another good thing about this time of year is we get to clean out the gene pool. Not inadvertently, almost this time every year, a wash floods out, and some redneck in a pickup truck thinks he can cross it, and typically ends up killing himself. And therefore, we get to clean out some of that inferior gene.
And stuff. we get more candidates for the annual Darwin Award too. But guys, the storms look worse than they are. I mean, yeah, I've seen the pictures from the news and everything. They're worse than the storms actually are.
We do get a lot of fallen trees out here, only because they don't have the extensive root system like a lot of the old trees do, back east or, other parts of the country. So they fall over quite easily.
Because we have something in our soil here that's known as caliche. Caliche is basically this big layer of hard clay that makes it difficult for roots to penetrate. But, I've heard agriculture experts in the Phoenix area say we've got some of the best soil around for growing stuff.
And who the people are that say, yes, but it's a dry heat you have in Phoenix. Those are people that don't live in Phoenix. I don't care, 110, 115, 120 is still hot even though it's dry. An oven is hot even though it is dry.
Exactly. That's what when the skin is crisping off your bones, you're not going to care if the humidity is 5 or 50%, for crying out loud. Although last time I checked, it was around 60% this morning, 63%. No, actually, wait, I'm sorry, 53%. Dew point was around 64. Humidity, or the temperature was around 83. No, 79 when I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning. Yeah. All right, let's get started. I'm going to let Kevin go first. He's chomping at the bit.
I'm going to go on a rant because this is a real hot button with me, and I get real tired of it. I contribute quite heavily to Facebook because I view Facebook a lot like a lot of people outside of the United States view Facebook. Not just a place to talk about what you ate, your dog. Although my dog passed away last week, I did put a memorial to him on it briefly, just so my family could know. But a lot of people use Facebook as a way to express themselves politically, to explain things that are going on in their country. As a matter of fact, the Arab Spring, which I'm not a fan of, was basically started on Facebook. People, corroborating, as far as protests and so forth. That started on Facebook.
Not to mention send our girls home. Or whatever that was.
But anyway, I have lots of friends who say, well, Kevin, you ought to ease up on the politics. Well, you know what? The war in Ukraine is not politics. The war in the Gaza Strip is not politics. what's happening on our border is not politics. That's called history. If in 1939 I had described Germany invading Poland, if I had described that in writing and put it in the newspaper, would people have said, well, that's just politics? No, they would have said, we're experiencing history. And you know what, people? That's what we're experiencing right now. There's a lot going on in this world, and you better pull your head out of your normalcy bias, because, no matter how much you pretend that these are not big world events going on, that you can pretend as much as you want, but they are.
It's people's way of not having to engage in reality. I'll give you an example. One time I was talking and I made a joke that didn't go over very well. It went over like a lead balloon. And I said, yeah, I guess I should leave the jokes to the professionals. Kind of went over. It's me trying to tell a joke sometimes is like Obama trying to speak without his teleprompter. And someone said, oh, don't talk politics. I said, that wasn't talking politics. It was stating a fact. It was humor.
Case in point, just the other day I was having coffee with a lady friend I know, and she said, Kevin, I really agree with a lot of what you have to say, but why do you have to post it on Facebook? So I said to her, well, what exactly do you think the purpose of Facebook is? She said, well, it's a way for people to connect. And I said, yeah, it is, but it is probably one of the better venues to discuss world events.
I've described it as, well, where did the American Revolution originate? It originated in taverns in New England for the most part. This is no different. It's just a way of reaching more people in a shorter amount of time. I mean, that's what it is. It's the same thing. It's no different, It really isn't. I
mean, go ahead and post what you had to eat the night before. Fine, whatever, but don't admonish me, because I'm trying to reach out to people and tell them what's going on.
Because Facebook, as with the rest of the world, is not all fun and games, folks. It's like, speaking of games, if I get one more game invite, I've never played any. I haven't even played. Oh wait, I have played Song Pop because I'm a music geek. But that's about it. I just stop it, folks. I don't have time for it.
Another interesting thing is somebody approached me. Well, didn't approach me. I was talking to him, having a beer the other day with this friend of mine, and he said, Kevin, Facebook is one of the biggest data mining sources in the world. You have the NSA. NSA can use a lot of information that you post your opinions, your political views, and so forth. So my response was, yeah, I'm sure they do. But you know what? If this is the world we're going to live in, if I'm going to be, could be considered a fringe person in our society, well then, you know what? So be it. I choose not to. I choose not to shut my mouth. I don't want to live in that world.
You know what? And here's the thing, folks. If we're considered fringe, think about it. Even as recent as 10 years ago, we were considered mainstream. And what does that say about the world? We haven't changed.
No.
The world has.
Case in point.
Think about it.
There's a person I know out there that I've known since third grade. She's a big advocate of gay marriage. Homosexual marriage, I call it, because
same-sex marriage.
Heterosexual marriage is between a man and a woman. Homosexual marriage is between two people of the same sex. Anyway, without splitting hairs. So I said to her one day, and of course, she never accuses me of being homophobic or what have you, but you can tell that's her tone. So I said to her, now what if I were in 1969 to have approached you as a child on the playground and said to you, one day you're going to think it's perfectly fine for two men to marry or two women to marry. What would you have said? And she said, well, I would have thought that was totally outrageous. And I said, of course you would have said it, because it was, and it is, in my opinion. But something has happened. Something's crept into our consciousness, and over the last 30 years or however many years, it's really been ramped up the last 10. but something's crept into our consciousness that ordinarily things that might repulse us are considered just fine now.
Well, and in fact, I need to clarify something here, too. I don't care what you say. Marriage is between a man and a woman. You look at the traditional definition of it, and there is a purpose for it, okay? And it's not, now I'm not even talking religious even, to be honest with you. Plus, the other thing is, hey, if two people want to be gay together, fine. I'm not going to stop you. I never have. Why? It's your decision.
But what I find interesting is that...
I don't agree with it, but it's your decision.
What I find interesting is that people haven't analyzed their own ideas and their own opinions very closely, or else they would say, how is it that I believe that now? What happened? Did I quote unquote grow in my thinking, or what happened? Or was I slowly nudged in this direction by the media? Whether it be TV commercials, whether it be sitcoms, very powerful one right there.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that very interesting. It's like, why am I all of a sudden the intolerant one when we've have 5,000 years of history showing otherwise?
Well, what did I tell you? You and I were talking about 2 weeks ago, and TV is a very powerful medium. And I made the comment that there were two big TV events in the last 20 years, 25 years, that did a lot to change the way we think about interactions and relationships between people. Number one was the Anita Hill trial. That changed the way men and women, to a large extent, interact with each other. It's gotten, it really moved in everything into the direction of you got to watch what you say.
In the workplace, especially.
In the workplace, especially. A man can't be a man, a woman can't be a woman. And the other event was the kiss on the Ellen show, on her sitcom she used to have. That was huge.
Do you know, I can't tell you how many women, older women, when I mean older, I want to say those that were in the workforce in the 60s and 70s, that have come forward and said, this political correctness stuff in the office is just garbage. You know how we used to deal with a man that was outwardly, was a lech or whatever, was maybe put his hands where they weren't supposed to be? We acted like women. We either slapped him or we told him, to back off. That's, and women don't do that anymore. They go to human resources these days.
Yeah, well, you speak.
And look for monetary damages.
That kind of leads into another thing. It's a lot of the reason why things of all stripes have crept into our culture nowadays that 20 years ago we would never have dreamed of, is because we've allowed, I'm going to say the left. That's all, you got, in order to face something, you got to be able to name it. And we've allowed the left to co-opt the terms of the argument and the language of the argument. Give you an example. And I don't remember the guy's name, but one of the founders of the pro-abortion movement, who has since recanted everything he believed back then, has revealed that we went out of our way to use certain words to describe abortion. We never came out and said abortion. We always came out with pro-choice, because if you called it abortion, pro-abortion, a lot of people would be turned off by it because they knew what abortion was. But if you start calling it pro-choice, that's a different story. It kind of softens it, kind of sanitizes it. And now it's moved into women's health choices, women's health care. And it has nothing to do with women's health care or women's health choices.
Orwell knew back in the 1940s when he wrote 1984, he knew that language actually shapes thought. It controls thought. And that's exactly what the Planned Parenthood has done over the years. And they coupled right to choose as a woman's right to choose. They coupled the women's movement with the pro-abortion movement. So now it's hands off my body, a woman's right to choose, and the child never becomes part of the equation.
And as with many things in society nowadays, the man is cut out of the loop. He's out of the loop.
Well, that's government for you.
But I mean, the whole thing with language, George Carlin did a skit on it one time. I don't remember the details of it, but he said, back in World War I, they used to call it shell shock. And now he gives through each of the different generations.
PTSD.
Now it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, but he goes through each war, how it was given a different label and everything. And it's to the point where it's like, what do you mean? You know, you can understand the term shell shock. Honestly, you understood the word personnel. When I first heard, I was working at a savings and loan here in Phoenix. When I first heard the term human resources, it's like, what's human resources?
Actually, the term human resources is actually a very inhuman term.
Yes, it is.
If you think about it, it kind of,
Think about it. The word personnel is a noun. Human resources, we've taken human usually denotes personnel. It has become an adjective instead of a noun.
And it insinuates that somebody owns those resources.
The noun is resources. Human resources is the modifier, aka adjective, to describe what type of resource it is.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it, folks. Language, like Rush Limbaugh said for many, many years, words mean things.
Oh, and don't think that the people who use them don't know that. They just rely on the ignorance of the populace to not realize what's going on.
And guess what? The populace is extremely ignorant. And let's differentiate between ignorant and stupid. We don't mean you're stupid. Ignorance means you don't know better because you're not educated enough on a particular thing. And that's, to be uneducated about a certain thing is not a bad thing, folks. Get that through your head. In order to be educated, you got to want to be educated, and you got to go out and educate yourself. Don't rely on someone else to hand or spoon feed it to you. Do it yourself. Here's the difference between ignorance and stupidity. You have a candle sitting in front of you. If you're ignorant, you'll put your hand in the fire not knowing it'll burn you. If you're stupid, you'll put it in the fire knowing it will burn you, and you'll do it anyway. That's the difference between ignorance and stupidity. And in the words of Ron White, the comedian, you can't fix stupid.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of demand-side economics, Keynesian economics. Keynesian has been known to fail over and over and over again, yet somehow our government seems to think they're going to get a different outcome.
And we're not talking just about Obama either, because Bush was guilty of it too. Since Reagan, every president that's been in office has been guilty of it.
Well, Reagan was the first one to come up with remember how he was, John Stockman was laughed at for bringing up supply-side economics and the Laffer curve. Basically, supply-side economics states that if you lower taxes, they'll bring more tax revenues into the federal coffers, which has been demonstrably true. Mm-hmm. But liberals don't like it because they think that rich people are getting over.
And we're having this discussion right now to kind of explain where we're coming from. I mean, it goes a long way to explaining where we're coming from. We're just trying to get down to the truth, folks. And when you obfuscate the truth, or you obfuscate the true meaning of events through language and sleight of hand and denial and whatnot, you're never going to get to the truth. You really, I'm sorry, language does that.
And the truth is quite a commodity these days.
Yeah, it's in short supply. It's very valuable because it's in so short supply.
Which kind of a good segue into, I think we have three major stories going on in the world right now. That's, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Gaza, and what's going on at our borders. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing that not so much Ukraine, but definitely the two other stories, Gaza and the border, that you can have two relatively intelligent people watching the same scenes unfold that come to totally different conclusions as to who's guilty, what's going on, etc. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree totally. I got a short article though. This is from National Review yesterday. Gutierrez in Spanish remarks, quote, GOP want to punish our community. It's a short article. I'll read it for you since it is so short. Representative Luis Gutierrez, Democrat of Illinois, one of the most prominent proponents of comprehensive immigration reform, offered a noticeably harsher message about Republicans when he switched to Spanish during a recent press conference. Joining the Congressional Hispanic Caucus as the House awaits a vote on a border bill, Gutierrez first spoke in English, criticizing Republicans' approach to addressing the border crisis and accusing them of putting political gain over helping the unaccompanied children crossing the border. The remarks were critical, as one would expect. The furthest he went was to claim that Republicans seek about Hispanics almost as though we are a vile, repugnant community to them that they vilify and demonize in every one of their statements. He then said he would make some remarks en español. Gutierrez started by saying that the issue at hand was about protecting the rights of children on the border, dreamers, and millions in the country illegally. He claimed that the president had authority to grant legal status to these groups and would act to do so soon, which is the reason Republicans are moving so quickly to stop him. He went on to take a much fiercer tone than he had in his English statements. Here's what he said in Spanish, which I will not even attempt to say. But the English translation is, they know he's going to act soon. They want to maintain this crisis to condemn our community, a community without rights for our kids at this moment, our dreamers, and for millions of others that the president has said he wants to help. That's what they want. They want to punish our community, and that punishment will be met with an electoral punishment. Be assured that we are not going to forget the mistreatment of our community has received. The vote on the newly amended bill is expected to take place on Friday evening. Okay, first of all, a few points. Number one, the ones that have been mistreated are the kids. I will say that, but not by the American government. They were mistreated by the people who brought them here. Or not by the American people, or the Congress. They were mistreated, and that was as a result of Obama opening the doors to them, to his executive unilateral execution of the, quote, Dreamer Act. That was never passed. He decided to do what he wanted to do. And no, Congressman Gutierrez, he does not have the power to do any of this. The president's one job and one job only is to uphold and execute the laws of the country. That is it. That is not a law. If it was to be passed, fine. But he is to uphold and execute the laws. That's why he is in the, quote, executive branch of government. He's not a lawmaker. He sets policy, but it's not enforceable. The policies are set to enforce the laws that have been passed by the legislature, which is the Congress.
And I'm not one to quickly use the R word, racism, but there's some hidden racism in there. When he's talking about our community, what is he talking about? Illegals coming up through the border from Central America is our community?
He's talking about the Hispanic community. Okay. So they're setting themselves apart.
Okay. Well, again, yes, our community. I mean, if we were having thousands of illegals coming in from, I don't know, Canada, Belgium, where Switzerland, wherever, and they were all white, wouldn't that be odd for me to say our community? Really? And
he says they want to maintain this crisis. The crisis was started by the president.
And also, this gets really lost in it, and it just drives me crazy. I was watching that financial show on Fox on Saturday mornings. What's it called?
Which one? There's like 4 of them.
I know. It has Wayne Rogers from MASH.
Oh, that's Cashing In with Eric Bowling. Eric Bowling.
And they're talking, with that Eric Bowling. And everyone's talking about, whether or not these illegals will be good or bad for the economy, blah, 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 blah. So Wayne Rogers explodes. He said, one thing I haven't heard any of you say, not one time, the word illegal. What about illegal don't you get? No other country in this world that is a sovereign nation just allows people to spill in unobstructed into their country. As a matter of fact, if you were to turn the tables and walk into Mexico, you'd probably get shot.
Not to mention the fact that if you become a naturalized Mexican citizen, you don't have the same rights as a native-born Mexican citizen, according to their constitution.
Really, read their constitution. It's pretty brutal.
Yep. And on a related note, this is how crazy it's getting. And if you've seen the video of this, you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay. One Republican, this is from National Review also? Or is this from The Blaze? I don't recall where I got it from now. I forgot. I think it's from The Blaze. One Republican congressman, quote, hit the right nerve Friday night and found himself facing the wrath of House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, a.k.a. Bella Pelosi. ABC News called it an unusual breach of decorum. As he spoke about the border funding bill Friday, Representative Tom Marino accused Democrats of making the border a political issue after doing nothing while they control the House, Senate, and White House. You know something that I find quite interesting about the other side, Marino said? Under the leadership of the former Speaker, Pelosi, and under the leadership of their former leader, Representative Steny Hoyer, when in 2009 and 2010 they had the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they knew this problem existed. They didn't have the strength to go after it back then, but now are trying to make a political issue out of it now. His comments incited Pelosi to charge across the floor and challenge him. Marino seemed taken aback as he responded to Pelosi's off-mic challenge. Yes, it is true, Marino said. I did the research on it. You might want to try it. You might want to try it, Madam Leader. Do the research on it. Marino wrapped up noting that, apparently I hit the right nerve, which drew applause from Republicans and another charge across the floor, complete with finger-waving from Pelosi. Later, a spokesman for Pelosi told ABC News, Leader Pelosi just wanted to remind the congressman that House Democrats had the courage to pass the DREAM Act and have the courage to stand up for the American people, for what the American people want, partisan comprehensive immigration reform. Oh, by the way, that's not true. Earlier this week, when John Boehner was going to bring a comprehensive immigration bill to the floor of the House, the phone lines at the Capitol building melted from people calling up to say, no, don't do it. And guess what? They withdrew the vote. So don't tell me it's the will of the majority of the American people. That's a bunch of BS and you know it. Okay, look it up. You can find ample proof of that. That actually happened. The spokeswoman also claimed that Pelosi accepted the congressman's apology. But a spokesman for Marino said there was no apology. Representative Marino did not apologize to Leader Pelosi and does not intend to do so, as he has nothing to apologize for, the spokesman told ABC News. She was entirely out of line in approaching him while he was recognized and delivering remarks on the floor. Marino later tweeted about the bizarre event or incident. This is where it gets funny or poignant. This is Representative Marino's tweets. Representative Pelosi called me an insignificant person on the floor of the House. I'll ponder that for a while driving to Williamsport tonight. Then he tweets, of course I'll be driving myself with no staff or security, and I'm just a country lawyer who worked in a bakery until he was 30. So maybe I am not significant enough to question the former speaker, but why then did she get so bothered by my comments? She's unstable. But that shows you the lengths they're willing to go to. And they count on the ignorance of the American people to not know that most of the American people are against this.
Don't people, when we're talking about these immigrants, whatever word you want to use, don't people see a disconnect? We've got 93 million people out of the workforce. 93, many of those not even included in our unemployment numbers. If you really use the true number of people who want to work but quit looking for work because they can't find any, the unemployment rate would be anywhere between 10 and 20%. So does anybody see the disconnect when at one time we're talking about, yes, they're going to do jobs that the average American doesn't want to do? BS. That's insulting. That's extremely insulting. We didn't become the most prosperous nation in world history being lazy. We're not lazy. The problem is they come in and they take jobs that would normally be filled by entry-level Americans, i.e. teenagers. When Scott and I were young, we worked at a pizza joint. Mm-hmm. We did.
I worked at a nursery. I worked at a pizza joint. I worked washing dishes.
In the summertime, I did help my stepfather. He was a carpet layer. I helped him do that. I did construction some summers, as did most of my friends. But you know who does those jobs now? Illegals. You almost need an interpreter when you go to McDonald's.
You know why? Because they can pay them less.
Exactly. So they've driven wages down, and so we're supposed to. When many of us are out of work, we're supposed to buy into this idea that somehow they're going to help our economy? How can that be? Because one of the first things that they're instructed to do, these new wave of immigrants, is when they get over here, first of all, not to go into their hearing to be kicked back out of this country, to avoid that. But secondly, to go to the Social Security office, welfare office or local welfare office or wherever, and start bleeding the system.
And going back to cash it in this morning, I don't remember who brought up the point. It might have been Eric Bolling. It might have been Wayne Rogers. But they were saying that these illegal workers, the ones that get affected the most by them coming in here, are the people who are low wage earners to start with. who are not skilled, who are making very little, because they'll come in and the illegal immigrants they'll be able to pay them even less, and these people will be out of jobs, and you get this freaking smug Jammu Green, who I can't stand. I cannot stand this woman. She gets up there and she says, "Oh no, those people are just believing what they hear in the media." What media? The media, her media. Sorry, Jammu, but the media's on your side most of the time, and they're on your side for this thing too. That's a bunch of BS. To say that is just avoiding the issue and avoiding discussing the issue. And by the way, I can't stand you.
You know, all immigration has been for many, many years. It's just been one big wealth transfer from our country to Mexico, Central America, whatever. All they do is they come in here, they take jobs that normal Americans would normally fill. They cram 15 of them into an apartment building and send 3/4 of their paycheck back to their families in other countries. Why do you think Mexico loves the idea of their people coming to the United States? Because they get our wealth sent right back to them.
You know, about 25 years ago, I run an apartment, and the apartment next door to me, and Kevin's right on this. I live next to an apartment that was a 1-bedroom apartment like mine. But guess what? There were 5 or 6 immigrants that lived in that house. I used to talk to them all the time.
Well, I'm a realtor.
They were 1-bedroom.
I'm a realtor here in Phoenix, and I go into a lot of vacant houses. And I carry a gun with me because Phoenix has been known to have a lot of, what do they call them? Safe houses?
Yeah, something like that.
Where the coyotes store 30, 40 illegals.
And by the way, a coyote is someone who illegally smuggles people across the border.
And they've had people stumble upon these places and been killed before. They've been shot by the coyotes because they know that they would be turned in otherwise.
And the ones that I you know what? I don't have anything against the kids that are coming over the border. I really don't. It's not their fault. Who I blame are the people who are illegally smuggling them over and taking advantage of their families by charging them exorbitant amounts to get them over. In some cases, their life savings. And I blame the ones the parents who bring their kids too.
And they're raped, murdered, all sorts of horrific things happen at the hands of these coyotes. And they're criminals. A lot of them are from the drug cartels, by the way.
And I think a point has to be made here. We got to get some definition of terms here and shed some light on this. Nowhere in the Constitution do I see that is the federal government's job to regulate immigration. It's not. It's up to the states. It's up to the federal government to secure the borders. Yes. You can't call them, as a result, you can't call them immigrants, in my opinion. And number 2, the only job in this regard that the federal government has is to naturalize them once they're here. It is, and so this crap about not allowing Rick Perry to mobilize the Texas National Guard where the federal government objects to it, he's doing it anyway, it doesn't matter, is a bunch of BS. The National Guard is a state militia. The state army, basically. He can mobilize them to defend their borders if they have to.
This conversation wouldn't have even been happening 30 years ago. People would have looked at you like it would have been nonsensical. What do you mean we're debating what we're going to do with people who enter our country illegally? What do you mean we're discussing it? We're having a discussion. There is no discussion.
And unfortunately, they should have solved it when Reagan was president. He kind of let it slide.
And of course, I will be called.
I'll have to say that.
I will be called a racist. I will be called every dirty name. I don't care what race it is. If it was happening in Canada, from the Canadian side of our border, I would be saying the same thing. Except one thing about Canadians, if they do come here, they're typically more educated, and that's a fact.
And the fact has to be said also, folks, that there was a time we let people in this country who were not that well educated from Europe and stuff, but they were also people who started businesses and industries and whatnot. But it got to a point eventually where we would only allow certain people in that were educated that could really benefit the country, not bleed it of resources.
Scott and I used to work for a guy who escaped East Germany. He was a baker, and he opened up what was to become, would you say that's the biggest pizza franchise here?
Probably, I'd say it's the biggest chain of pizza restaurants in Phoenix area.
In Phoenix, and I think he's in a couple other states, isn't he, as well?
Last time I checked, I think he's just in Nevada.
But that's America. That's what America was built on.
And the thing about it was, actually, he didn't start them. They were started by Tommy Cassell, who used to own Tommy's over in Sunny Slope.
Yeah, exactly.
But he owned it for 6-7 months. And this guy, Bernie Glaser, bought it from him after 6 or 7 months. And I started working for him shortly after he bought it.
And he was a hard ass, too.
Yeah, he worked you hard. He knew it worked. I mean, this guy escaped East Germany. He went over the wall, guys, to get to freedom.
He understands capitalism better than any American does.
And there were people who worked for him that didn't like him because he was such a hard ass. Yeah, he was.
I know this.
So what?
I know this musician. He's from Bulgaria. You know what he said to me the other day? He said, "I think I'm going back to Sofia. It's freer over there." He said, "You Americans don't even realize what's happening to your country right before your eyes."
Yeah. Yep. We don't. And something's got to be done about it. I mean, Boehner has he filed a lawsuit against the president, which I was kind of like, now it's just a political move. Some people have said impeachment, but the take that Charles Krauthammer has on it, I think is pretty good. This is from National Review. Krauthammer's take: amnesty via executive order and impeachable offense, but impeachment would still be political suicide. It says, this is like 2 paragraphs. Talk of impeachment is a concoction of Democrats. That's another thing we have to discuss. But that doesn't mean there isn't a grander strategy by the White House and its congressional allies, Charles Krauthammer warned. On Tuesday's special report on Fox. Yeah. Give it a try, folks. Fox is not that bad. Compared to the big 3 and CNN, it's not bad. All the kids are doing it. He speculated that the Obama administration may be trying to exhaust the idea of impeachment and softening people up for when the president uses executive action to grant legal status and work authorization to millions of immigrants in the country illegally. Such an action would be clearly lawless, and it would be the biggest domestic overreach of a president in memory and an impeachable offense, he said. But if Obama did go ahead with his amnesty by fiat plan, Krauthammer still thinks impeachment wouldn't work. I would be 100% against impeachment because it's political suicide, he said. And they know that. Don't think they haven't thought this stuff out. That's why, how many Republicans and conservatives are actually talking about impeachment?
0.
But you hear Democrats and liberals,
the media,
talking about a possible plan to impeach the president or fear of impeachment. And the president is saying himself, I heard him saying in 1 or 2 speeches, go ahead, impeach me.
It's the biggest straw man that you could ever imagine. They're dreaming up something that's not even happening. And with the help of the media, they're plastering it on to the Republicans. And the Republicans have mentioned it 0 times.
It's ridiculous, folks.
And did you see Obama? I don't know. He was probably talking to some 20-something, college students the other day.
Handpick audience.
Of course. And have you ever seen anybody so unpresidential in his life? He just sits there and goads and taunts. And
he's like a schoolyard bully.
It's a joke, and he starts chuckling.
Except in real life, he would be the one that would be bullied. Come on.
You ever seen him throw a baseball?
Exactly. Or lift weights?
I posted one day, I said he throws like a girl, and this woman comes back and she says, that's an insult to women.
Exactly. I bet you in her prime, our mother could throw better than him.
Oh, most definitely.
I mean, when she was a girl, she'd play hardball with the boys instead of softball with the girls until our grandmother found out when she got injured one time and her knee blew up like a balloon. Then she had to stop it.
Are we gonna? We can finish out? I guess still talking about the border. We haven't even touched Gaza yet.
Yeah, I mean it's important. I mean, not to say that Gaza isn't. It just, folks. Americans have always had big hearts. America has had a big heart, but just because it's kids doesn't mean we should accept them.
It's not just kids.
Exactly.
The majority of them are young adults. Many of them really dangerous gangbangers.
A lot of them are, at least, at the very least. Not to mention disease.
I mean, have you seen some of the pictures of some of those tatted out, what are they, MS-13?
MS-13.
Gangbangers? They look like they came straight from hell.
I mean, they're covered from head to toe in tattoos. Oh, I'm sorry, folks. You know what? Come on. Let's talk about tattoos real quick. And body piercings. I know a lot of you say it's my body. I can do what I want with it. It's fine. You know, it's my body and I'll pierce if I want to. But really, folks, I think some people, too many people have gone overboard with it. It used to be the exception in society. Now it's the rule.
I call it what it is. I call it desecration.
I think it is too, to a large degree. It's not body art, folks. Have you seen, come on. Really? You're so ashamed of your skin, you gotta cover it up. And don't say you're just augmenting it or improving it.
No.
Come on,
it's
folks.
It's desecration.
Anyway.
What are the things they stick in their ears? What are those called?
Gauges.
Gauges. Have you ever seen anything so retarded as that? How about the guys who stick the piercings in their lips and so forth? What would you do if you got in a fight with one of those guys? What would be the first thing you'd do? I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd grab one of those. Boy, that's a submission hold that he ain't going to get out of.
No kidding. And then, I don't know. I'm just having visions of women who have like had tattoos put on certain parts of their body, and as they get older and their skin gets looser, it starts to sag.
Oh, some of these beautiful girls.
Oh my God!
What are you doing to your body, sweetheart? You know, it's just deplorable.
Yeah, I know they're beautiful until you see them in a bikini, and it's like, oh, really?
Yeah, it's only going to get worse as they age. But you know, I feel part of it's probably the aging process, being in my 50s. Now, I feel really, this is the most uncomfortable time I've felt in my lifetime.
Yeah, no doubt.
As to how two segments of our society, of our population, can just think so much differently than the other. I mean, I think one of the biggest examples of that is what's going on in the Gaza Strip right now. I mean, some of these lefties, and I've got friends, are so they're either willfully ignorant or they're evil geniuses. I don't know what it is, but all they do is bring up the fact, oh yes, Israel's murdering children. No, they're not. Hamas is murdering their own children. They're putting missiles in schools, hospitals, houses, you name it.
They're putting them in the line of fire.
And Israel has gone out of their way they've sent leaflets out. They've gone as far as making phone calls telling people, get out of here. We're going to be bombing this area. And of course, Hamas tells them not to leave. So you've got these kids dying, but the blood is on Hamas's hands. It's not on the Israelis' hands. And I got a good example of that. I got a Facebook from a lefty friend of mine. He's a lawyer. Imagine that. And it shows a picture of a young baby, newborn, she has tubes running in and out of her, and she's in a what is that? For preemies, what are they?
Incubator.
Incubator. Geez,
I was in one for about a few weeks.
I drew a blank, but anyway, it says on that caption, it says this baby's name is, I don't remember her name, so excuse me. Her mother was killed by Israeli shelling, and she was induced, and the baby was born. The next picture, the next caption says, and this baby died 2 days later because the Israelis knocked out the electricity to the hospital. So this is how the two sides see things. You know, the Israelis get bombed, they respond, and they're the bad guys. They sign truces only to have them broken an hour or two later.
Well, it happened just this week. There was a ceasefire. It didn't even last 2 hours.
But, you know, this has been going on my whole lifetime, you know, in Israel. But the thing that I find amazing, and I think is just as poignant and as important, is people's attitudes, their lack of critical thinking. I'm not saying because you don't think my way, you can't critically think. But the facts are there. They're there. If you choose to ignore them, well, then you're willfully ignorant.
Mm-hmm. And people do. They want to stick their head in the sand. They want to be an ostrich. People, because there are two things you don't talk about in polite society: religion and politics. And that's where I'm talking about, where they try to make things that are not political, they try to make them political so they can say, oh, we can't talk about that. They just want to disengage. They don't want to be engaged.
Well, either that or they'll call you names, because that has the same desired effect. The conversation ends and they look like they're the winners.
Yep. No, I wasn't going to say anything, no.
Well, speaking of Israel, I found and I've known about this quote for a long time, but Golda Meir relating to the Arabs in the Middle East, she said, the problem in the Middle East will end when the Arabs love their children more than they hate us. Yep. And I posted something the other day on Facebook. It came from it was the Anti-Defamation League, their website, and it was 20 quotes by Hamas, basically calling Jews everything less than a dog. Blame it, saying that they make their matzah balls out of the blood of Christians and Muslims.
Answer me a question, folks. Here's something you got to consider. Through history, let's just talk since the 20th century. You have seen the Nazis do this. You've seen the Islamists do this. They post posters. Nowadays they post postings on Facebook, and they always refer to the Jews in Israel as dogs, pigs, whatnot. Have you ever seen the Israelis reciprocate? Never.
As a matter of fact, the Palestinians that live in Israel don't want to leave there. Because they're treated better there than in Palestine. They have good jobs. They have good places to live. They have food. They have shelter. They don't want to leave there because they're treated so well.
Mm-hmm. And this whole and another thing, folks, you just, they say that the Israelis have stolen land and they're occupiers. That's BS. They gave up the Gaza Strip 10 years ago and pulled out all civilians and all military. They've given land up. I can remember when that happened. The criticism that how much the Israel was criticized for doing that, and a lot of people were actually fearing for Israel when that happened. And rightly so.
I want to read you real quick. This sums up the history of Israel and the quote-unquote Palestinians. It's by John Voight, the father of Angelina Jolie.
Damn fine actor.
He had an open letter to the leftists in Hollywood. He then gives them a crash course lesson on the history of Israel, and he says this. He says regarding the leftists in Hollywood, they are obviously ignorant of the whole story of Israel's birth. When in 1948 the Jewish people were offered by the UN a portion of the land originally set aside for them in 1921, and the Arab Palestinians were offered the other half. The Arabs rejected the offer, and the Jews accepted, only to be attacked by five surrounding Arab countries committed to driving them into the sea. But the Israelis won. The Arabs tried it again in 1967 and again in 1973, launching a sneak attack on the holiest Jewish holiday. Each time the Jews prevailed, but not without great loss of life. And when Israel was not fighting a major war, it was defending itself against terrorist campaigns. Those lands that were won, those were conquests. They were attacked, and they won those lands. Mm-hmm. They were not occupied lands. They were won. Every country in the history of man has battles, and they win and they lose land. And most of the land that the Israelis ended up taking was used as buffers to keep from being attacked again. And you know what? They gave them all back. Mm-hmm. Gaza last year. And you know what they did when 10 years ago? You know what they did when the Palestinian people got Gaza Strip? First of all, there were thousands of greenhouses that the Israeli people had erected, and they grew anything from vegetables to you name it. The first thing the Palestinians did, well, first of all, they elected Hamas as their government. Mm-hmm. Secondly, they destroyed all the greenhouses and turned them into, missile depots.
And real quick about Hamas, you will hear the media always refer, and apologists for Hamas will always refer to it as a political group, a political party, when in reality it is an organization that the UN or the U.S. government has labeled as a terrorist group.
Charlie Rose interviewed the head of Hamas. What's his name? I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
The founder or the current head of it, or the founder?
The current head of it.
I don't know.
I forgot
I'm
his
not
name.
sure.
But anyway, he pushed him, and finally he said, now, if Israel and the Palestinian people can come up with an acceptable solution to the two-state issue, would Hamas accept it? And he said no. He said no. Basically, their stance is this is the biggest shell game ever. They play this game like this two-state solution. They don't want a solution. You know what they want? They want the end of Israel. They don't want them. This is pure hatred. And whenever you hear the term hatred thrown around in this Israeli conflict, it's always aimed at Israel. And they're the only ones truly looking for a solution.
Yep. It's true. They are the only ones. They want peace. Why? What has Benjamin Netanyahu say? The reason why they're doing this is so that they can have peace again, so that they can have quiet. You know? And what prompted this is, once again, Hamas has been bombing the snot out of them for what? How long has it been going on this round of bombing?
I don't know.
Or missiles? The last year? Months?
Oh yeah.
This latest round? And finally they had enough. Who was it? Who's the ambassador? No, it was Netanyahu himself who said it. He said that 2/3 of the Israeli population has to, at a moment's notice, go into a bomb shelter. That would be like saying everyone from the East Coast to Colorado in the U.S. would have to do the same.
But
that's the attack they're under.
By the way, Scott, did you know this, that there's a Droid app and a Apple iPhone app that actually goes off, a siren goes off every time that there's a bomb dropped on Israel. And the guy had to shut his phone off the night because he couldn't sleep. And he lives here in the United States. And he was the phone would go off every time the Israelis were shelled. And
you know the reason why this is happening to the Israeli people? One simple fact: because they're Jewish. That is plain and simple the only reason.
Well, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of similarities between modern day Arab nations and how the Nazis felt about the Jews. In the 1940s. I mean, the only difference so far is that the Germans were actually more successful at doing it because the Jews were, at that time, they had that normalcy bias. They didn't believe what was really happening to them until it was too late. And they vowed never again would that happen. And I blame them not one.
Neither do I. They have this is not an offensive by the Israelis. This is a defense. They're defending themselves. They had enough. They want to end it all. They're trying to shut down the tunnels, and they're trying to just stop it all, end it all. Go ahead. Another great Golda Meir quote was, she said, in this whole Middle East crisis, she says, we're at an advantage over all the other Arab nations in that we've got nowhere else to go. Exactly. They have plenty of places to go. You know, they really do. So basically, she's saying we don't have a choice. We either fight or we don't survive. And you know what? The only reason the Jews have survived as long as they have in world history is because, and this is not racist, you just look at the history of it, going all the way back to Joseph. Because they are good at managing finances and making money. Go back to the Bible stories of Joseph when he was in Egypt. The only reason that Pharaoh spared his life was because he was able to increase the crops in the granaries and the money in the coffers. And not to mention the fact that he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. But that's the reason why, folks.
Well, money, plays a really important role in the Bible.
And you know what? Through history, there have been tyrants who have enlisted the help of Jews as advisors, financial advisors, and whatnot over the years, and that's kept them together as a people. Honest to God.
Well, I mean, going back to the money issue in the Bible, what was the only time you have in the New Testament you saw Jesus actually really enraged? Was when he turned over the money changers' tables.
And that's another story too. Well, don't want to go into it today, but there's a parallel to modern day Christian churches in that, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, that's the great apostasy.
Okay, you been to a bookstore inside of a church any time recently? Yeah, okay. Show me the scriptural foundation for that. Selling stuff in a church.
A lot of it's New Age too, if you look at it.
Anyway, I'm just saying. I've got my opinions on that kind of stuff. It bothers me. I think that any Christian that uses their quote ministry to make a living, I just have a problem with it.
What do you make of these mega churches?
I don't like them. I mean, there's a book, folks, you should read, and it's available for free on the internet in PDF form. You just do a search for The Early Christians. I forget who the author is, but just do a search for it. You can get it in PDF format. I actually have a hardcover copy of it, which I lent to a neighbor of mine, but unfortunately she passed away before she can give it back to me. But it is available in PDF format for your computer, for your phone, whatever. And it's called The Early Christians. It's writings by 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century Christians that gives you an insight as to how Christianity, right immediately after Christ's death and for the next 200-300 years, was actually practiced, and before it got organized.
The Catholic, this is not Christian Catholic bashing, but the Catholic Church did a whole lot to.
And guys, there's not a lot of difference between the Protestant Church and the Catholic Church. They've kept some of the same traditions alive that the Catholic Church had for
it's really
for
pretty
thousands
simple.
of years.
Just the gospel. Read the gospel. Read that. It's no more difficult than that.
Nope, no, it isn't. Oh man, where did the hour go? Well, I guess we can call it a day, I guess, unless you got something else. Wrap it up. All right, guys, we will be here next Saturday at 11 o'clock. That's 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. We got a time change coming up before too long, so we're going to have to start an hour later.
Yeah, we're right now.
For us,
right now Pacific time.
It's for us because we're rebels.
Yeah, Arizona doesn't have.
We don't change time at all, folks. So 11 o'clock Pacific would be 12.
So
for
we
us.
adjust for everybody else's time.
Remember, guys, go to PhoenixUndergroundRadio.com and you can listen to us live, or we do a rebroadcast on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. Pacific. So be sure and check it out. Anyway, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
God bless.